mother was Elizabeth?
Elizabeth, yeah. Yeah, Mary visited Elizabeth, and Mary had her song, and that's what we looked at last week. So we're skipping a section here. We're going to skip the rest of chapter 1. John the Baptist is born in chapter 1. Now we're skipping that. We're skipping the birth of John the Baptist and what Zechariah, his father, says about him, and we're moving into the birth of Jesus. So we're picking up the story in chapter 2 this morning. We're going to read 2, 1 through 7. And then next week, just for your information, we'll be in 2, 8 through 21. So the rest of the chapter. So this week and next we'll be covering chapter 2 of Luke. A census taking place, a registration here. Let me go back a second. Thank you for reading that, Paul. Last summer, when we were down in North... Last summer? 2 summers ago. Thank you, Glenn. I can't even keep track. Where does time go? 2 summers ago, we were down in North Carolina. We had spent years down there. And I had worked on a zip line. You know, this goes through trees and people zip across the forest. And I worked with a guy named Jerry. And Jerry was in his probably mid to late 60s. Just really kind of a washed-up hippie. Never had really kind of grown out of that. And Jerry lived in his big Dodge conversion van. Didn't have a house, anything like that. He had a big kayak on the top. And Jerry spent most of his time, he worked. He hung out at the local bar. He listened to music. Then he smoked marijuana. That's pretty much what Jerry did. He never really grew out of his kind of 60s mentality. And anyway, I had worked with Jerry for the summer, and he didn't have any family. But I got a call probably 2 or 3 weeks ago from our old boss down there, with whom Jerry and I worked, telling me that Jerry had died. He had died a couple weeks ago, or a few weeks ago. And as the boss and I kind of reflected on that, it was rather saddening because just nobody really cared. You know, he didn't have any family, he didn't really have any friends, he didn't do anything, he just worked and hung out in the bars and lived in his van. He died kind of, and that was that. And I think stories like that always kind of sadden us. It saddens me anyway, because if we're honest about it, you know, Jerry kind of had a life of somewhat of just insignificance. He just kind of drifted through life and never really, let's say, did anything, but I guess he didn't. He didn't really do much. And I think that all kind of strikes every single person in their heart. You know, that somewhat fear of living a life of insignificance. You know, whether it would be thinking of our own deaths or us passing and not having made any difference, or not having, if anybody cared that we passed or died. And I know that's something that I think about from time and again, just what am I doing of significance while I'm here on this earth? Am I doing anything worthwhile? What am I doing here? You know, and I think oftentimes we do think of ourselves as being insignificant. We look at the world's problems, we look at the things going on around us, and tend to ask questions like, what can I do? You know, I'm just one person. How can I contribute or make any difference, or any significant difference, or make a significant impact at all in the places where I find myself? And I think it's a question, does anybody else think about those things at all? I get one nod. I get a couple nods. So, okay. Well, for those of you who are nodding, maybe you can relate to this. For those of you who don't, forget it. So, no. But Luke is going to help us out with this morning. Paul read the text for us. I think Luke is going to help us think about in a new way the significance issue, not only in our own lives, but in the bigger picture of ultimate significance. And Luke is going to hone in on this for us, both in the life of Jesus, I think, and in our own lives. So we're going to see the significance issue in a big picture, and then we're going to pare it down and narrow it down to see what does that mean for us with significance, ultimate significance in our own life. So let's go back to our text then this morning, verse 2, 1 through 7, and thank you again, Paul, for reading that for us. Verse 2, verse 1, what's going on there? What did Caesar Augustus decide needed to happen there? Census, okay. Yeah, census or a registration. This is a really good way for the Romans to keep tabs on people. That's how they often went about doing that. How did they keep tabs on not only necessarily their own people, but these outlying territories that were around Italy and Rome? In this instance, it's going to take effect in Judea. How did the Romans keep track of those people? They did it with registrations and censuses. They also used it to raise money, but it helped them keep tabs on the people that were under their thumb, under their control. The Jews are under their thumb, under their control right now. He's not coming into play here, but if you went back and looked in Matthew, you would find, does anybody remember who's the king of the Jews at this time? Starts with an H. Herod, yeah. So he's kind of the puppet Jewish king. He answers to Caesar Augustus. So we've got the Jews that are under the thumb of the Romans, and the Romans keep tabs on them. They don't want things to get out of control. That's going to come to play a little later in Luke with Pilate and some of the things that goes on with Jesus' crucifixion. But so this registration, the census takes place, and Mary and Joseph, where do they go to? What city do they end up going to, or what town? Bethlehem, yep. From where? Nazareth, yes. And why? Now the why is because there's a census, but why does Joseph and Mary end up going to Bethlehem? What does the Scripture tell us why they go specifically there? Yeah, because, who said that? Yeah, Christine, because Joseph was from the line of David, and Bethlehem is the city of David. So what's Luke doing here? What's Luke cluing us into? There's something really important here that Luke is telling us here. What is that? It has to do with Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. What is that? What is he telling us here? He didn't come right out and say it, but it's very obvious. Anybody want to draw that out for us?
It's from the lineage of a king.
Yeah, there you go. This baby is from the line of David. And Luke doesn't give this to us, but if you go and look at Matthew, Mary was also from that line. So you got both of his parents coming from that line. So what is Luke cluing us into then here? That Jesus' claim to the throne is going to be legitimate. So Luke's a great storyteller. He does that not all that subtly, but he clues us into the fact that Jesus is in the line of David. And they're headed to Bethlehem to register. And this is, Luke is such a good storyteller. And this is ironic, and, irony. Does everybody know what irony is? Nods there. The people here, Augustus, Quirinius, and probably some degree Herod here, the people who are trying to keep tabs on the Jews, keep them under control, are the ones who are participating in bringing about a new king. What we think isn't going to happen ends up happening. The people who wouldn't want this to happen play an integral part in bringing forth a new king. And we've talked about this in other sections, or in other sermons, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, that God works in unpredictable ways. And this is one example of that. God is working in an unpredictable way, using Caesar Augustus and Quirinius to go about bringing Mary and Joseph to Bethlehem to give birth to this little baby. And what happened here this morning with the sound system, that's another example of how God works in unpredictable ways, isn't it? And it's all good. So we've got this mighty Caesar, who you'd think had everything going for him, this big guy going about helping accomplish God's plan. And what happens then? We've got this little baby boy, going to be named Jesus, born in a stable, put in probably some sort of feeding trough, Can you imagine the smell in that place with all these animals and poop and all sorts of other good stuff in there? Rather humble beginnings for the King of Kings. And a very ironic beginning for the King of Kings. Comparing Caesar Augustus in Rome, surrounded by the Roman army, and is safe and secure wherever he lived in Rome. And then you've got this little baby king in a stable among the cows and the horses in a little manger. Such an ironic start to Jesus' life. It's getting back to God working in predictable ways. It's amazing to see how this humble beginning is giving birth to a boy who's going to turn the world upside down.